He was already well known, though not of international fame, and I was overawed by his presence and by his quietness and beauty. He didn't say much. After all, it is half a century ago, but the memory of him sitting there in that dignified Harley Street dining room with the hansom cabs trotting up and down outside us remains with me, and I should like to bequeath it to you. The memory is vivid. The beard only slightly streaked with grey then, I think. The voice always gentle. And I do myself the credit of realizing then and there that I was in the company of a great man.
The feeling of being in the presence of a great man, which the English novelist Forster experienced, was shared by many who met Rabindranath Tagore in his prime.
At first I thought the visitor must be one of the prophets stepped from the Old Testament. His grey hair hung down to his shoulders, his beard was long and fine, and his handsome figure was dressed in flowing robes which reached the floor. But what struck me most, and has remained ever since in my memory, was his face. It had a Christ-like gentleness, nobility, sadness and lovingness.
I suddenly discovered I could not utter a word in the presence of this distant man who had been so close, so familiar to me through his poetry.
But the odd thing was that admiration for Rabindranath did not necessarily mean familiarity with his work, for it was unlikely that the multitude that greeted him and extolled him in his tours abroad was conversant with all that the alien Bengali poet did or stood for. Professor Madariaga would like to draw a parallel with another great man.
Einstein was admired by at least 1 million persons, for every one who could understand what he wrote. Tagore belongs to this rare category of spirits whose radiation flashes far out into the world beyond the direct action of their work.
If Rabindranath had done nothing else in life, his efforts to bridge the gulf between East and West, to place humanity on a broader base, and to obliterate differences created by barriers of culture, these alone would have given him lasting eminence. But there were many more aspects to his personality.
He asked us to get rid of these caste barriers, asked us to bring the Hindu and the Muslim together. He asked us to strive for the unity of the country. The enemies we have to fight are not the enemies from outside. They are those who dwell within us. And therefore it is, he insists again and again, that we have to correct our own hearts and minds. The revolution, the Hridaya Parivartana, has to take place in minds and hearts of our young people. So for him, education was the great instrument by which men's minds and hearts could be remolded to the pattern of what we think is the right idea.
Poet, novelist, essayist, painter and composer, educationist, social reformer, and fighter against political injustice, all this he was. But even this does not reveal the fullness of his personality.
Father could not bear to see anyone suffer. He would himself nurse if any of us fell ill. It is common knowledge how he nursed my mother when she lay in bed before her death for weeks on end, and how he looked after my sister Rani, a victim of tuberculosis, taking her from one health resort to another. When he could not get a conveyance for himself, he walked all the distance from Kathgodam to Almora along the Dandi which carried Rani.
Eldest son Rathindranath also remembers his extraordinary capacity to withstand pain.
When once he was stung by a scorpion, he sat quietly with his legs stretched out before him, trying to think that it was somebody else's leg and not his, not of his essential self.
And he had his foibles too, as Aurobindo remembers.
When he arrived in Cambridge in October 1912,
he lived almost solely on sanatogen and carried about a bottle of sanatogen always with him.
But more characteristic was a desire for change.
He easily got tired of living in the same room or the same house for long. When he could neither change the house nor the room, he would put up partitions and shift them whenever he grew tired of the arrangement. Shantiniketan bears testimony of this change-loving habit of his. There are more than a dozen cottages there in which he had lived at different times. He was also fond of changing the arrangement of the furniture and decorations to suit his mood at the time. In the early days, he had with infinite care renovated 2 dingy rooms in the ground floor of the Jorasanko house. For decoration, he had purchased a number of reproductions of English artists. With these, he plastered the walls. Later, these were successively replaced by Ravi Varma prints and paintings from Ramayana and Mahabharata by some unknown artist.
The 19th century saw a great resurgence in the social, political and cultural fields in Bengal, and the man who may be said to have been its architect had close ties with the Tagore family. But although Raja Ram Mohan Roy had been a friend of Rabindranath's grandfather, Dwarkanath, it was Dwarkanath's son who really proved to be his true spiritual successor. Rabindranath Tagore carried on Ram Mohan's unfinished task of tracing Hinduism to its monotheistic basis in the Upanishads and ridding it of its constricting bonds of orthodoxy. Rabindranath, born on the 8th of May, 1861, was Rabindranath's 14th child, and this was probably lucky for him, for there was so much that he could learn from the elders. Music and the arts ran in the family, and there was scarcely any branch of learning that at least one of the brothers had not mastered. Robi's first book of verse, Kobi Kahini, came out when he was only 13. At the age of 17, he published imitations of the Vaishnava poets under the pseudonym of Bhanusingho. He was doubtless pleased with the fact that they took in many a critic of the day. But writing love lyrics and setting them to music was not enough to please the elders. He had to have a regular education, like all young men of respectable families. At the age of 18, Robi was sent out to England. Living in Brighton with his sister-in-law, Gyanadanandini, Robi wrote more verse and mocked at Victorian England in a series of articles he sent out to India for publication in Brother Dejendranath's admirable literary journal, Bharati. He also amused his niece and nephew with his musical antics. Indira was only 6 at that time.
After all those years, I still remember how my uncle used to entertain us with his comic style of singing a particular Hindi song.
All this, of course, leads to the fact that he did not complete his course of studies at the London University. For all his facility for verse and music at this stage of his life, Rabindranath's emergence as a real poet in his own right.
গগনে গরজে মেঘ ঘন বর্ষা, কুলে একা বসে আছি নাহি ভরসা, রাশি রাশি ভাড়া ভাড়া ধান কাটা হলো সারা, ভরা নদী খুরো ধারা খর পরশা, কাটিতে কাটিতে ধান এলো বর্ষা। একখানি ছোট ক্ষেত আমি একেলা, চারিদিকে মাকা জল করিছে খেলা, পরপারে দেখি আঁকা তরু ছায়া মসি মাখা, গ্রাম খানি মেঘে ঢাকা প্রভাত বেলা, এপারেতে ছোট ক্ষেত আমি একেলা, গান গেয়ে তরিবে কে আসে পারে, দেখে যেন মনে হয় চিনি উহারে, ভাড়া পালে চলে যায় কোনো দিকে নাহি চায়, ঢেউগুলি নিরুপায় ভাঙে দুধারে, দেখে যেন মনে হয় চিনি উহারে। ওগো তুমি কোথা যাও কোন বিদেশে, বাড়ির ভেড়াও তরি কুলে পেয়েছে, যেও যেথা যেতে চাও যারে খুশি তারে দাও, শুধু তুমি নিয়ে যাও খনিত হেসে আমার সোনার ধান কুলে পেয়েছে, যত চাও তত লও তরণী পরে, আরো আছে আর নাই দিয়েছি ধরে, এতকাল নদী কুলে যাহা লয়েছিল ভুলে, সকলে দিলাম তুলে থরে বিথরে, এখন আমারে লও করুণা করে, ঠাই নাই ঠাই নাই ছোট সে তরি আমারই সোনার ধানে গিয়েছে ভরি,